I don't need my tape to be holding anymore, so I can push against my table and hopefully start into that other nylon piece on the other side. And I'll probably have to back it out several times just like I did on the front one there to make it work. It's just really threading through that wood tight, which is good. It'll help it hold, but it kind of needs to thread into that other piece too. Oh well. That means they use some real high quality plywood there to make strength, and that's also good. Okay. You keep tightening this one until it just starts to pull into the wood a little bit. Just a very small amount. You don't want it to be too tight. There's just no need. It doesn't get any more strength and it makes it look bad. Okay. That looks pretty good. And as I can see, my little backer plate is pushed up a little. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and back these out one at a time and push my plate up because I want it to be tight. So I'm going to go ahead and back these out a little bit and run them up. I've actually got a tool for this that goes into my drill. I'm going to go ahead and get that. And I'll work on this for a second. And then I will be ready here in just a minute to do my control rods. And so I will go ahead and get these seated in just right. And I'll go ahead and do the other side. And then I will be back. But right there, no, it's not that one. Let me see here. It's that one probably. There it is. Okay, there's my little bit that goes into my drill. I'll make these a little easier. And you can find a lot of this stuff. A lot of it's made for RC cars. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and work on that, and I'll get the other side done. And then when I get ready to do my control rods, I'll be back. Okay, I'm getting ready to set up my control rods. I've already snapped my clevis on the other end on my wing just to see if it's the right size. And here's a little trick I've showed on some other videos. Now, I'm not sure which way I'm going to use these, so it doesn't matter. I'll just drill them both out. I'm going to use the second hole in from the end on these. And I took a little piece, I clipped a little piece of my control rod off at an angle with my snips. And I chucked it up in my drill. And I'm going to drill the hole that I think I'm going to use out with that. So what that does, that makes the exact size you need. If you grab a drill bit and drill these out, most of the time it will be the wrong size. It will be a little too small or a little too large. And that's why I do it with an actual piece of the control linkage. That way I get the exact size. But anyway, it works really good. If you cut it at a little bit of an angle, it allows it to have kind of a little sharp end on it. Okay, there it is. Those are drilled out to my size. Now, I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit here. Alright. Now, I went ahead and clipped that into the top of my control horn. And I've not hooked up my receiver yet. There's no need. I'm just going to go ahead and snap that on there, and I'm going to set it exactly, I'm going to move my servo, where it's exactly 90 degrees. And then I'm going to go ahead and set that up there. Now later, when I do hook my receiver up and everything, I will just pop my servo horn off. Now, I do need to do that pretty quickly before I actually hook these up to see which side I'm going to have to cut off. But to do this step right here, I don't have to do that. I just go ahead and I mark my center. Okay. And then I take a little square-headed pair of pliers, which I've got over here. Yeah, here they are. The little square head on them makes it work a little better for me. And go ahead and pop this off, and these are going to need to be turned down. I don't even have to pop it off really, I can just bend it down. And you have to bend it past and then back. And the reason you do that is it'll get a much more 90 degree if you move it past. Now I'm going to go ahead and see how close this is to going on my other end, and you have to be really careful fooling with these. This stuff will, and I about did it there, it will poke a hole in a wing and nothing flat. But see my bend, I went a little too far with it, and then you just go back and that'll make a much more right angle, and that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and stick that through my control horn on my servo, and I'm going to see if that'll go up. And see how that stands off a ways? Okay, so I'm going to have to go ahead and work on my bend a little more. I'm going to have to try to make it a little bit more right angle. The way you do that is you go back and then you bend it back. And you bend it a little past and then you go back to 90 degree. And that will make it a much more 90 degree angle. Once you get a really good, sharp 90 degree angle, these little fittings here will work really well. And see, these need to be, and all I got to do is turn it like this when I clip it in. They need to sit. Your plane's going to be upright most of the time, so they'll be stronger if they're sticking through like that. They just will. So it'll be like this, and like I said, I'm not got my receiver hooked up yet. Okay, there it is, nice 90 degree. Here's the fitting. It goes on them. Okay, and it snaps. Make sure that your bend is tight enough. That one worked perfectly. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and snip it off, and I leave, oh gosh, I probably leave almost 1/8 on these ends. Okay, and then as soon as I clip off an end, I take my sanding block, and these, the way I'm doing them, they will be sticking down all the time. So you're really going to catch those sharp ends on your hands or your clothes or whatever. But I go ahead and sand those off. I don't want them sharp. And it takes a while to sand your sharp end off those. Sand on them a while and then check them with your finger and see if the sharp end's gone, and that one isn't. It's going to take a little more. It takes a fair amount of sanding to get these dulled down. Okay, maybe a little more. Okay, there's that one. Now I won't finish these up until I get ready to, until I go ahead and plug in my receiver and hook it up. That way I can center my servos and see which end to clip off these. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other side, and when I get ready to plug in my receiver and everything, I'll be back. Okay, I got my control linkages for my ailerons done, and they're ready to go on, but what I need to do is I need to go ahead and get my radio turned on and set up a new model in it. So I go to System, I go to Model Select, I go to New, and then change to New Model, yes, and then I go ahead and type in U-CANDO. Let me see, let me go ahead and back up and do it in all caps. Okay, U space can do 3D and then 46. Okay, enter. There it is. You can do 3D 46. Okay, yes. Now I'm going to go ahead and pick acro. Acro, yes. Okay, now let me see. I'm using a 6-channel. That should be. I'm not sure if this has 2 per elevator. I need to see here. Yeah, I believe it does. So let me see here. With a 6-channel receiver, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I have the rudder. That's 5, and then I have the throttle, which is 6. So I can. So what I will do is I'll do 2 ailerons. Set. Okay, and then I will do normal, and then single engine, and no retracts, no spoiler. Okay, and that will give me my channels. Okay, so aileron 1 is channel 1, and aileron 2 is channel 5. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bind my receiver up with my radio, and I've got a little plastic screwdriver that I get with some of my little helicopters I use for this stuff. And is all you do is I go ahead and I go in my radio, and I go in this particular radio. It's an Aurora 9X, and I go ahead and I go into Spectra. Back that away so you can see it. Okay, and then it'll say binding, so I choose binding, and then Optima, because I'm using an Optima 6. Radio, are you sure radio stopped? Yes. Okay, now, that's what I need to do, is I need to hold down my link button. I've already got a 6-volt bench battery hooked up in a switch. I hold down my link button, and I turn my receiver on. Okay, there it goes. Now that shows that it linked up. Reboot RX and check that all functions are correct, and then press finish. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and shut this off, and I'm going to hook my ailerons up to 1 and 2, which are right here, or actually channel 1 and 5. And I don't know which one's which right now. Okay, channel 1, and the polarity on this receiver is that the ground wire goes down. Most receivers will show you on the side what your polarity is, so pay close attention to that. Okay, there it is. Channel 1 and 5. Okay. Now I turn my receiver back on. Okay, and I see that those are my ailerons. And they are. So finish. That's just fine. Now is what I'm going to do is I'm going to see which end on these are 90 degrees, and then I'm going to cut the other end off. So I'm going to go ahead and take my end off my control linkages that I've got laying here that I finished up a minute ago. I don't know what I did with the other one here. Well, I've got one laying here. I don't know what I did with my other one. But anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and set my control horn up there, and I'm going to see which side of it works better for 90 degrees. That one does right there. So I'm going to cut my other end off. Okay. And that one's that one. Okay. Now I could actually put my servo screw in, and I will here in a minute. Now I bet you that thing rolled off the table a minute ago. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and try to find my other control linkage. There it is, I see it. Lay it over here. Okay, I'm going to take this in, and I'm going to put my horn on the servo. Actually, this is the one, doesn't really matter. Oh, my radio is getting ready to die. Let me go ahead and change the battery in it real quick. And I will be back. Okay. Got my arms clipped off. Now I'm ready to go ahead, and I'm going to put a little piece of fuel line up on each one of these. And then I'm going to go ahead and put it into my servo arm. On my second hole back is what I'm using on these. Kind of hard to get started there. Okay, there you go. And then I'm going to snap on this little, I don't know what they call these particular type of clevises. But anyway, and then I take my fuel line and I pull it up on it. And like I said, they don't show this they don't show the fuel line on these in the books, but it seems to me like that type of clevis would need fuel line more so than the other one. Okay, and there it is. And again, you want it to set, when you're playing upright, it'll set in that like that. It'd be less likely to come loose or anything. Okay, with that hooked up, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to snap my end here. And it's, I'm going to start out with the first hole on the top of those. See how close I am to right. See, I'm a ways off on that one. I really shouldn't be that far off. I'm going to go ahead and see. This one works closer on this one. Well, it doesn't. When you do your bends, it'll change your length a lot of times on your clevises, and of course that's why you threaded this up so far, so you've got some adjustment, which is fine. That one actually moved more than they usually do. I'll just go ahead and thread my clevis back out to get 90 degree on my servo. And is what I'm trying to get is I'm trying to get a completely neutral position on my aileron. That's what I'm trying to get. Okay, so I'm going to work on getting these just the right length and getting these on there, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, I've got my servo arms at 90 degrees pretty well. I've got my linkages snapped on. about where I want them. I've turned my radio on and checked that they're pretty close to where I want them to be. And they are. Now I'm just putting my servo horn screws in. And I will go to another part. I believe they tell you to go ahead and mount the wing to the fuselage is what they tell you to do next, I believe. Be real careful when you're doing stuff like this. It's real easy to slip off there and stick a hole in the wing. And I've done that before. And I'm also going to have to go ahead and let me go ahead and pull my bench battery off here. Just set it to the side where it's out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and pull my tape that I've taped my corners of my ailerons with. And I'm also going to go ahead and clean up. I'm getting a fair amount of my tools built up on my work area. And it really makes it hard to work when you end up with that much stuff built up. So I go ahead and I clean it quite frequently, and I just actually pick them up and set them over here to the side, my other table, to where they're out of the way, but yet they're still real accessible. And you get so much built up so fast when you're working on stuff, and it really makes it easy to damage your airplane by rolling it over on things, and it just makes it hard to work. So I'm getting all my tools picked up, and like on my Allen wrenches and stuff, I go ahead and I put them back in the little holders, even though I'm probably going to use it again here in a minute. That way when I do look for it, I know where to look for it at. Okay. I've got a few of my CA hinges left. I'll need those on some of the other surfaces. And I need to cut a few more. These little things come on the servos, and these are like little bread ties. And I used to throw these away, but these come in really handy. Tying stuff out of the way and so on. Okay. Put up my ruler and my little trim heat gun. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and pull the tape off my ailerons that I've got them taped to keep them fairly centered. Be real careful not to pull your covering loose or anything. It's real easy to do. And it's still snowing today, but at least it's not sleet. The last one that I built and did a build video on was a Eagle 580, and the sleet was hitting my roof so hard that you couldn't even hardly hear it. Couldn't hear me talk. I had to turn my radio up so loud that I got complaints from having my radio up too loud. I thought that was better than hearing the sleet. So anyway, so it's snowing like crazy, but at least it's not sleet. And beautiful Sunday afternoon here in my shop building an airplane. You can't ask for much more than that. Okay. Now, look in the manual. I believe they tell you to go ahead and bolt your... And I can go ahead and unplug my receiver too. I won't need it for a while. And I've still got my string tied on these. I'm going to go ahead and kind of wrap it up in them. So it's not just hanging around in the way. But I do want to leave it on there so it doesn't fall back in the wing. So I'm just going to kind of wrap it around. And then I'm going to get my masking tape out and I'm going to tape it. I learned this the hard way. In the past, I wouldn't do stuff like this, and in the process of turning it around and everything and working on it, constantly my leads would be back down in my wings. Having them back down in your wing, I would have to thread them out and spend a fair amount of time getting them out of the wing again each time. And I had to do that several times before I learned to do something like this to hold on to them. Okay, so I'm going to get my 2 nylon bolts out, and I'll end up cutting these off later to a better length. And they will go in the bottom here. Thread them in just a little bit. I believe is what they're wanting you to start doing is mounting this little bottom plate. This has a little bottom plate. Yeah, that's what it is. Okay, mount the wing to the fuselage. Trim the 2 bolt holes in the belly pan using 6mm post holes in the belly pan to the moving coupler. Okay, you have to actually mount the little belly pan onto the... So, I'm going to go ahead and get my fuselage out of the plastic here. It has a little belly pan piece there taped on it. Let me go ahead and zoom out so you can see a little more what I'm doing. There we go. Okay, move my wing to the side and take my fuselage out of the plastic. Again, leaving it in the plastic until the last minute to help protect it. It's a very good idea. Be real careful when you're doing this. It's real easy to damage something with your hobby knife. And it's real easy to damage something when you pull all this out, something falling out. And I do something now I didn't used to do. And I do it mainly because I buy a lot of models. And I put together a lot of models. But what happens is my models sit in the boxes for long periods of time. And sometimes they warp in the boxes. So what I do is when I get them out, I check them and see if there's any warpage. And if there is any warpage, it's not really that hard to do. You just set them in a location that you could set some weight on them or something. And it's pretty easy to get the warp out of them. But I always check everything to see if it's warped, because I've had some of my models, after sitting around for a long time in the box, it ended up warped. And you can take that out of them while you're putting them together, and it'll be a lot easier than after you get them built. And also this tape that's on them to tape things down. I see some edges there that are going to have to be ironed down. But be very careful getting this tape off, especially if it's been on there for a while. And that has... I'm going to go ahead and heat my iron up, and I'm going to go ahead and knock some of these edges down with my iron. And I've got a little bit of trim there on my wings to put down. I usually wait on this stuff until I'm almost done. The reason I'm not waiting on this particular airplane, and I'm just doing a few little spots, is these spots here, where I'm going to be fitting this wing back and forth, right here, these are really vulnerable, and I'm going to be pushing back and forth on those constantly, and I'll have those pulled loose if I don't watch it. And I did find a little place in some of the graphics on the wing that I could just touch down with my trim iron. I'm going to go ahead and heat it up. Get it warming up. I'm going to go ahead and look at the manual and see. There's normally some little blocks that go on the inside. They really don't give you much information on it here. They normally have some little wood blocks that mount inside this piece. My 60 size did. But what they're wanting you to do is put just a small amount of 6-minute epoxy on this edge. And boy, there's not much to glue there. Not much to glue to. And they normally have you go ahead and cut a little bit of covering, I believe. Loose, let me see here. Sheeted. I just have to see. It looks like they're telling you just to put a tiny amount of 6-minute epoxy on this edge and glue it to the wing after you get it in place. It'll actually glue it to the covering with 6-minute epoxy. But I'm really surprised that they have you do it that way, because that's quite a bit different than the way that they have you do it on the 60 size model. So I'm going to go ahead and probably look at the manual on the 60 size model and stuff and make a decision if the way that they're telling me to mount this is a good way to do it. It seems to me gluing a little edge of wood down to covering, I don't know, it doesn't really seem like that would be really good. But like I said, I'll look in my 60 size manual and I'll see the way they do it there, and I'll try to figure out if that's a real good way to do it. And I'm heating up my iron to go ahead and iron some spots down. It's going to take a fair amount of time to go ahead and heat that up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to iron my edges down and look in my other manual. And as soon as I get that done, I will be back. Okay, I got my iron heated up, and I am just ironing down these little edges inside the fuselage where my wing's going to set up. And I've already been working on them some, but these little edges here, you need to roll them over and heat them up and stick them down. If you don't do this, when you're fooling with the wing and stuff, you'll be pulling these up and probably pull your covering up even further. For some reason they don't do a real good job on these, sticking these down. And again, I turn my little trim iron, I turn it all the way up on monocoat. Monocoat takes a lot of heat. I've been working on that a little bit. Now right here is where your landing gear mounts. And the covering's kind of loose there, and it really doesn't matter, because that's where your landing gear is going to mount up. And I need to look on the 60 size one. The landing gear is pretty weak. I had to redo it a couple times to get it really right, so I'll have to look at that. Now I've got a little bit of trim on this wing. See if I can find it. Yeah, right there. A little spot there that I need to go ahead and lay down. It doesn't take much with this much heat to lay down some of these little corners and stuff. I really don't see much. But I'll go over this entire plane when I'm done. But I do kind of hit the spots as I see them. I do hit some spots that are trying to roll up. Every time I get one of my irons out, either my full-size iron or my trim iron, I try to hit a few places that I've seen in the process that need a little attention. And then later on, when I get done with the airplane, I'll go over the entire plane with the trim iron and the full-size iron. Alright, well I believe I've got that, but now I'm going to go ahead and let my iron stay hot there, and the reason being is, and I put a new X11 blade in my deal here. I'm going to go ahead and cut these holes out, and I want to make these pretty neat, and then I'll go ahead and I will go around them with my trim tool. I start from the inside and I get out to the edge there where the wood is. And I kind of go around a circle with my knife leaned in a little. And this stuff it's pretty hard to cut, even with a nice sharp blade, and it's real hard to make a nice edge. But I try to. I hold a little bit of pressure on it with my thumb, and I go around my hole as accurate as I can, with a little pressure on it so it'll cut good, and my blade tipped in. And sometimes you have to work your blade back and forth a little bit to get it to cut again, like a little saw. And try to make a really nice, neat little hole there, because those are going to show. And there's no perfection, but if you don't try to make a neat hole on these, they just look like a tattered edge, and they just don't look good at all. If you go ahead and try to make them look pretty neat, they don't turn out that bad. Okay, let me go to the other side. I hold a little pressure on it with my thumb. I start from the inside of the circle, or in a ways. I don't start off at my edge, and then I kind of curve into my circle, into my hole, and I lean my blade in with a nice sharp blade, and I like the Z11 Exactos are the sharpest I've found, which they're pretty decent. They don't hold an edge real long, but they're decent. A lot better than the tower blades and so on. Okay, kind of take your time. Go around all the way until you get to the end here. Those turned out pretty good. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put my little pieces away. Put up my hobby knife. And I'm going to take my trim tool, and I'm going to go around those holes that I just did with it and lay the covering down. Now I'm just really trying to get it around these holes right now, not much else. And I'm doing that. I'll come back with my iron and everything later and try to do a better job on this entire piece. But the reason I'm doing this now is where I cut these holes, any of my sags in my covering that I had that went over the top of these holes could have pretty easily been pulled loose. So now I've got that down. Now I'm getting ready to go ahead and put my wing on my fuselage. Get my iron unplugged and get it out of the way, because that'll play heck with your covering real easy. Set it over here where it can cool down without getting it against anything. Alright. Now, I use a little screwdriver for this, especially once I get this piece on that has an edge up a ways. And the reason I do is when you're threading these, that edge will stick through and help you align it. These can be real tricky. I don't really like these type. I love this plane, but I don't like that particular engineering part of it. But oh well. I'm going to go ahead and bolt my wing down to my fuselage. And I'll get my belly pan piece set up there and probably taped a little bit, and hopefully mark the spot, and I'll be back. Okay, I slid my wing down on here, and you have to start that little front dowel, and it goes down a little tight the first few times, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just kind of, you slide that dowel in the front, and then you slide it down to where your nylon bolts will line up with your blind nuts. I'm going to go ahead and tighten them down. I made sure my wire wasn't hanging out anywhere on my top side of my wing. And I looked at my book, and I looked at my other book, and it looks like you glue that little hatch right to the covering, which is really strange, but it's the way I want you to do it. So that's what I'm going to do. That wing is sheeted right there. So I could actually go through and remove a little bit of covering in that spot and probably get by with it. Now they're telling you to go ahead and push this backwards about as much as you can. So something like that. Alright, well let me mark it and everything and figure out exactly if I'm going to follow the book's ideas or do my own, and I'll be right back. Okay, well, everything I've read says it'll be fine gluing it directly to the covering, so I'm mixing up a little bit of 6-minute epoxy, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue these edges mostly along the sides, and I'm going to leave a little distance there because I don't want it to run down and glue to my fuselage. And then what I'll do is after it cures, I'll take this wing off and I'll go ahead and use more epoxy and put into those little grooves and put as much as I want. So right now I'm mixing up a little batch, and then as soon as I get this set up there and glued, I will go ahead and use some, of course, tape. I'm going to go ahead and put a few pieces of tape the way this would want to slide down, just for starters. So I'll have those on there. Like I said, I'll be in and out taking my denatured alcohol and going over my seams on this. Try not to get it everywhere as I do it. Okay, so I got my 6-minute epoxy mixed up. And go ahead and take this and very carefully put it on these edges. And if you'll pull your stick from the inside out, it won't get on your outside edge as much. I actually put a little more in there, that way it can run down and stuff. And like I said, I'm going to go over these after this cures. I'm going to go over these again. I don't trust this. I really want a really strong bond. So it doesn't take a lot of glue there on that little edge, especially considering I'm going to go over it. But I do want to kind of get it all the way along there, so it can, whatever it does do, it can do well. And again, I'm leaving quite a bit of gap there between the front and on the rear of this, because I don't want it to run down and glue to my fuselage at all. And remember, this is only 6-minute epoxy, so I got to work pretty fast here. They also say to put it back as far as you can. That's so you can slide your wing into the little dowel bolt, the little dowel pin real easily. So once you set it up there, you need to push it back. Okay. Yeah, I got a little bit of glue on it everywhere there. Now I'm going to try to flip it over and put it just about exactly where it goes the first time. Because I don't want to smear it around and have my glue everywhere. So I'm going to try to put it just right where it goes, almost exactly the first time. And there it is. And I really got such a small amount of glue running out that I don't even really need to go denatured. That's a very small amount. I don't think it'll be a problem. Yeah, go ahead and put a little pressure on it. Hold it in place, and being that this is only 6-minute epoxy, you can actually move it around and get it right where you want it. And 6 minutes is not a very long time. I will probably go ahead and tape it from the other side. Just to make sure. Tape it from this side also. Being careful not to move it off of my position. Making sure to keep it as far back as I can. Okay, it looks pretty good. Like I said, I can move it around a little bit in this process and keep it right where I want it. I want it as far back as I can get it. And of course I do want to push it down a little bit, but I don't have to put a ton of pressure on it. I don't mind having a little bit of a gap here and there. That way in a minute when I go back with more epoxy, because I am going to go over it, I'll have a little slot there to work my epoxy into. I keep repositioning it, get it right on the money where I want it. The tape does kind of hold it and does help a lot, but you can still move around a little bit, especially if you've got your plane moving to one side. Or I can see it keeps pulling this one over. All right. Looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and clean my mixing stick off. And my glue is actually already starting to just start to get tacky and harden up. So I really need to make sure that's right where I want it. 6 minutes is not much working time. So whenever you're using 6-minute epoxy, you realize 6 minutes goes by real fast, and I leave it on my mixing pad so I can see when it's starting to set up. And I can go back and I can still move it around a little bit if I need to. Doesn't have to be perfect, but the closer it is, the better your model will look. It's not one step that makes a real nice, good flying model. It's all these little details, every one of them, that come together to make a really nice model airplane. It really makes a difference to pay attention to these details. And sure, your airplane's going to get, in time, it'll get beat up from putting it in the truck, and it'll get scratched up, and the covering will get a little loose from, being hot and cool and stuff, but that can all be put back in shape. If you glue this in the wrong place and it shifts off to the side on you real bad, you're probably not going to be able to repair that. It's something you're going to have to live with, and it's fine. It may not bother some people. It would bother me. So again, I go to a lot of trouble to get it right where I want it, a lot of trouble to keep it right where I want it, and I do it the whole time my epoxy is setting, especially with 6 minutes. And then as soon as this sets up real good, which setting up real good on 6-minute epoxy, I'm probably talking about 10 or 15 minutes to get hard enough to handle without any problem. It'll set up and have a pretty good hold after 6 minutes, of course, being 6-minute epoxy. But before I go ahead and redo it and go ahead and put a bunch of glue in these grooves, I'll probably let it sit 10 or 15 minutes. And my glue is actually starting to set up. Yeah, it's starting to set up pretty good. So that's great. And of course, see this little gap up here in the front there. They're telling you to go ahead and push that back as far as you can. And that's to allow you to snap that wing in on that dowel and give you plenty of room. Alright, That's set up enough that it's not going to move around on me. And of course, like I said, I'm going to give it a few more minutes. And I didn't clean it up with denatured alcohol because I did a neat enough job with my glue that there's just really nothing to clean up. There's just really no excess to clean up. So I'm going to let that dry for 10 or 15 minutes, and then I will pull that wing off, and I will go ahead and mix up a little bit more 6-minute epoxy and go over all my seams front and back to glue them. If I had tried to do that in this process, is what I would have it running forward and trying to glue my wing to my fuselage and trying to glue my wing to my fuselage here in the back, and that would have been really hard. I could have put very small amounts on there and probably got by with it. Or I could have actually taken a little bit of wax paper and stuck down in there and probably got by with it. But there's no need. This right here will attach it, and then as soon as it sets up real good, I can go back, I can put my 6-minute epoxy in all my little edges and then clean it off with denatured alcohol, and it should be super strong, and that'll be it. So I'm going to go ahead and let that cure for a minute, and I'll be back.